Hey guys, how's it going? So UFC 318 wrapped up and I'm going to go through the main card and give you guys my future matchups for the fighters on this card. So let's just get straight into it. And because I won't be matchmaking for Dustin Poirier for the main event because he retired after this fight, I'm going to have a room for a prelim fight. This one I think has the most implications on the rankings, and that was Brendan Allen versus Marvin Vettori. Allen won this one, dominant win over Vettori. There were moments though where it got a bit close. Vettori was dealing a lot of damage to Allen at points in the fight, which was a little concerning here and there. But Allen kept it standing surprisingly, didn't take it to the ground very often where I thought he'd find the most success. Chose to keep it standing, was dealing some big damage to the face of Vettori as well. And after this fight, I have two possible matchups for him. My favourite one's Reina de Ridder if he beats Whittaker this weekend. I think this would be a really fun striking and grappling match. They're both really good in all areas of a fight. I think Reina de Ridder might be slightly better in the grappling, but we've seen recently that he can stand and bang. He did that with Bo Nickel. And then Allen as well, really good in the grappling, but also against Marvin Vettori, he looked way better in the striking for most of the fight. Alternatively, if that one's not on the cards, I do like the idea of a Caio Borralho matchup if he loses to Imavov in a couple of weeks. They've already fought in a BJJ bout where Borralho dominated for most of it. He looked really good that one. I think running it back in a UFC MMA bout would be a really fun way to sort of either solidify Borralho's wrestling or put Allen striking on the map. And sort of let them both lay it all on the table, use everything they know. And I think just rankings wise, this would make sense as well if Borralho loses in a couple of weeks. So those are my two options. I like Reina de Ridder a bit more, so I'm going to stick with that one, but other one's not too bad either. And now on to the loser of the first fight on the main card, Daniel Zellhuber. Pretty bad performance from Zellhuber here. He sort of let the fight run away from him. He only relied on kicks throughout the majority of the fight. He let his hands go at points, wasn't really finding much success though, especially compared to Johnson. So he just sort of just kicked the whole fight. Didn't really do much damage. Didn't make any statements. And I think for his next fight, he's going to need someone who will sort of stand and impose their will. Sort of similar to the way Johnson did. As a sort of bounce back tune up for Zellhuber. And I think the best fight, in my opinion, would be Quail and Salkild. Salkild's very new to the UFC, admittedly. He's near the bottom of the rankings, or he's slowly been climbing, but still not sort of near the top 15. But he's had three very dominant wins. One on the Contender Series admittedly, but it was still a very good win for him. And then another two in the UFC, and he demonstrated recently against Yanao Ashmouz. He is very well rounded. In the striking, he'll definitely beat up on you. He does a lot of damage on the feet, and he has some real power. But even on the ground, he was actually controlling Ashmouz, who usually is pretty good in the grappling. And just reversing whenever it suited him, holding the dominant position for most of that fight. Very, very good fight there. And he's a very sort of fan favorite. A lot of people are seriously rating him as this new sort of lightweight prospect. He's very dangerous with the hands, and he's very popular. He's already appeared on 2 pay-per-view cards, 316 recently, and he actually had a pretty high up spot on that one. And for someone like Zellhuber, I think this would be a really fun fight to sell. Both will sort of stand and exchange on the feet. And for Zellhuber, I think it will give him a chance to bounce back into the rankings area, sort of outside the rankings, a bit lower than the 15. But I think a good win over this very impressive, dangerous prospect could put him back in that sort of contention to get into the top 15. So I say run this one next with Quail and Salkild, and we'll move on to the winner. And the winner of that fight, Michael Johnson. Very, very impressive performance here. He's a very old veteran of the sport. He's been in the sport for a while now. He's nearing the end of his career, I think. And a lot of people counted him out in this fight, especially against such a young, sort of hungry prospect in Zellhuber. But he had a really good performance this fight. He didn't really face much adversity, admittedly. Zellhuber wasn't firing back nearly as much as he should have been, and he didn't really mix it up at all, which led Johnson just to stick with the same sort of blitzing combo, exit the exchange approach, which won him the fight dominantly. But I think for his next fight, he needs someone who's going to put up a little bit more resistance. And I think Drew Dober is that person. He's on a pretty bad losing streak. Dober definitely needs a more manageable opponent next. He's been put up against these really dangerous prospects, Manuel Torres, Gene Silva, all these knockout artists. And I think Michael Johnson will be a bit more manageable for someone like Dober. And for Johnson's behalf, this fight would be sort of a lot of competition for him. Dober isn't the easiest guy to beat when it comes to sort of outlasting him in a decision. And I think Johnson's striking did look crisp enough where he would be able to pull that off in a striking battle. Overall, I just think this is a really good test. If you don't like the idea of this one, I also think that King Green would be a fun fight. They're both very old in the sport. They've been around for a while now. Both sort of been in those lightweight peripherals for a while. But that's entirely dependent on how Green performs against Diego Ferreira, and that's even if he does fight after that one. He might retire next fight. He is getting up there in age, but Drew Dober first pick, but I wouldn't be mad with a King Green matchup. That'd be a very fun battle of the veterans. And we'll move on to the next fight. And now on to the loser of the next fight, Dan Ige. He looked really bad this fight. He didn't throw as much as he usually did. He didn't really engage at all outside of the moments where he sort of had to, and it got frantic in the second and maybe bits in the third. But he didn't really do anything. And come Tuesday, he'll probably be outside the rankings by a small margin, but still outside of the rankings. So I think he does need a guy who's sort of rotating around those outside the 15 ranks. And I think Melchizedek Costa's there. Costa's picked up 3 really good wins this year. He's very, very active. And these are against some pretty tricky names. Christian Rodriguez, Julian Erosa, Andre Fili. Made them all look pretty bad as well. Dominated them for the most part in their fights. Submitted Fili as well, which is pretty difficult to do. And outside of a few losses to names like Steve Garcia, he's consistently looked good in his fights. And I think he definitely does deserve that shot at the top 15 soon, if not in his next fight. And I think Costa's ground game will be sort of the perfect counter to someone like Ige, who's a big presence on the feet, with this fight being a test on who can sort of switch it up a bit more, and whether Ige has the wrestling to take on Costa, and whether Costa can stand and bang with Ige. I just like this matchup as an idea of sort of make or break for both these fighters. So I say run this one up next. And the winner of that fight, Patricio Pitbull, while he won, not the most amazing win. He didn't really do much outside the second where he had Ige hurt, but the whole fight, he was just sort of waiting. He didn't throw much. He relied mainly on his takedowns and not really much else. And I think this win shouldn't reward him with a matchup that's really that much higher up the rankings. He'll most likely be around 12th, maybe a bit lower, maybe even a bit higher, who knows, when the new rankings come out. And for his next fight, I think he needs someone who will sort of push forward on him. Yair didn't do it. Ige didn't do it. And I think a really good opponent who just recently entered the featherweight rankings would be Steve Garcia. Garcia looks really good in his recent fight against Cater. That was sort of a constant pushing forward attempt from him, really circling Cater back against the cage at multiple points in the fight. Cater didn't really throw much either, and Garcia was the one pushing the action, which I think will be really good for someone like Pitbull. It will force him to sort of use a bit of urgency, because his last 2 fights, he's just been sitting on the back foot, not throwing much volume, waiting for counter shots or just waiting to get a takedown opening, but not really pushing the pace, and Garcia will definitely force that on him. Alternatively, if you don't like the idea of Garcia being put up against someone like Pitbull, maybe Josh Emmett. I like the idea of him going up against a heavy striker where he definitely needs to sort of turn it on or he's going to get finished. Or Yusuf Zellhuber. Matchup-wise, it makes sense. Rankings-wise, it makes sense. But I just think Zellhuber will bring the worst out of him. Zellhuber's very back foot heavy. He'll circle around on the back foot, won't really throw much. And as a result, I just could see Pitbull doing the same. Standing his ground, but not throwing much back either. So my 2 favorite are definitely Steve Garcia first. I love the idea of a Garcia matchup to see if that Cater win was Garcia's skill or just Cater sort of leaving the division and sort of being out of his prime. But if not that, I'd say Josh Emmett would be very fun. Good bounce back fight for him as well. But yeah, next fight. And now for the loser of that next fight, Kevin Holland. Pretty bad performance from him. He got wobbled early, never really recovered as the fight went on. This wasn't the Holland we're used to seeing. D-Rod sort of imposed his will on Holland. Holland had moments in the third. He actually almost finished Rodriguez, but not enough. Pretty bad loss for him. He's going to be outside the 15 after this. How much lower, I don't know. Probably not much because he is 14th at the moment, but he definitely needs to fight someone sort of circling the outside of the 15 region. And I think Jake Matthews is a logical next pick. Matthews got a very impressive win recently over Chidi Nurjakwani, where he submitted him very early in the first. Absolute dominance in that fight. He didn't really let Nurjakwani get much striking off, so maybe if it did stay standing, it would have been a bit different. But either way, it happened the way it happened, and Matthews took Nurjakwani down and just imposed his grappling will on him. Granted, Nurjakwani doesn't really have the best grappling, but it's still a good win for Matthews. I also think this will be a very manageable fight for Holland. Holland's likely to be the better of the striker, maybe just barely, but still probably going to be the better striker. But Matthews has demonstrated sort of a well-roundedness that I think will prove sort of tricky to Holland, especially with his new recent grappling-heavy approach. I think Matthews will be able to bring some sort of struggle to that. If not Matthews, because honestly there are a lot of different opponents that could go up next against Holland. I think a really good contender recently would be Mike Mallet. He got a very nice win over Charles Radke, brutal knockout, probably one of the best of his career. He has been circling outside that top 15 ranking spot for a while now, and I think he definitely deserves one more fight to sort of get him near there, or if not, a fight to get him in. So Jake Matthews for sure is my first pick, but if not, maybe run up Mike Mallet. And the winner of that fight, Daniel Rodriguez, most likely will be placed in the top 15, if not just placed outside of that. After this very impressive performance, not many people have Holland that sort of much in trouble as Rodriguez did this fight. Granted, there were moments that Rodriguez was also getting hit heavy. He almost got put out in the third as well. So while it was a good performance, there are sort of areas where I'm looking at it and thinking in the top 10 sort of range of opponents, they're going to exploit that and they're going to put him away. So I think he needs another test before he sort of moves towards that top 10 spot. And there's been another guy who has recently entered the top 15 on a somewhat weird win, and that's Gabriel Bonfim. I think this would be a good matchup next for someone like Rodriguez. Bonfim won against Wonderboy recently, but it was a less than dominant win. In fact, it was very, very close split decision that a lot of people actually thought Bonfim got a robbery win over Wonderboy, with Wonderboy dealing the most damage, but Bonfim sort of clinching up and wrestling a bit near the end. I actually had it for Wonderboy, but I can see how they scored it for Bonfim. But once again, he needs another test, so does Rodriguez. I think this one would be really good to solidify one of these prospects in that top 15, while the other one needs to go back to outside the rankings, make his way back in there. Because currently both of them are good, but they haven't made a statement yet that says that they belong in that top 15. So I say run up Daniel Rodriguez next versus Gabriel Bonfim as a real test to see who's top 15 worthy. And we'll move on to the co-main event. And the loser of the co-main, Roman Kopylov. Not good performance from him here. He let Costa walk him down, let Costa do some real damage to him. Definitely needs a fight outside the top 15 as sort of a tune-up. And I think the best fight depends on what happens next week at Whittaker versus DeRitter, because I think that a potentially super fun striking battle lies on the cards if Sharon Magomedov beats Marc-Andre Barriault. I think Sharon Magomedov will bring a lot of challenge to Kopylov. They both have very similar styles, and it's going to be a very fun striking battle with both sort of whipping kicks to different parts of the body, relying heavily on the striking. I actually think Kopylov has a lot more finishing potential than Sharon Magomedov, but Magomedov is a lot faster and sort of mixes it up a little bit more, especially with spinning elbows and all those sort of weird unorthodox punches, while Kopylov's very sort of kick heavy, punch heavy, but not much else, but also can finish opponents very easily. And both of these fighters will be sort of fighting for that 15th ranked spot. And I think this will be a perfect way to sort of almost get them there. So they've been trying to push for Shara in the top 15. I think this will be the next manageable step for him. Alternatively, if Magomedov loses next week, I think the winner of a Gerald Meerschaert versus Michael Oleksiejczuk could be a good challenge for Kopylov as well. Obviously not that much name value compared to someone like Magomedov, but if Michael Oleksiejczuk wins, he's picked up some very, very good wins recently, and I could see him slowly creeping towards that top 15 with a win over someone like Kopylov. So first pick, Kopylov versus Sharon Magomedov. If not, maybe Gerald Meerschaert versus Michael Oleksiejczuk. But yeah, next fight. And now on to the winner of that fight, Paulo Costa. Very good performance from him here. He had an absolute dominant 30-27 win over Kopylov. He looked like he did back in 2021, back in the days where he stuck to what made him good. He marches forward, lands big, does real damage throughout the fight, and it doesn't really shy away from a gunfight on the feet, not really backing up. And it worked for him. He was punishing Kopylov, absolutely dominated him for all 3 rounds of the fight. He should be rewarded pretty heavily for this one. It looks like he's back to his original form after sort of a skid in his career. And I think a good matchup for him next depends on what happens at 319. I think he should fight the winner of Michael Venom Page versus Jared Cannonier. Ideally, I want this to be Michael Venom Page, but there are 2 issues with that. One, I don't even know if Venom Page gets past Cannonier, and 2, even if he does, I don't know if he'll stay at middleweight with him also having sort of a run at welterweight at the same time. Very dependent on that, but I think this would be a really fun matchup. Venom Page is very elusive on the feet. Costa's going to have a hard time marching him down and landing on him, but also Venom Page really hasn't gone up against someone who could put his lights out like Costa or sort of cause a bit of an issue on the feet and is as sort of imposing in the octagon as Costa. So I think that could be a really fun fight. And if Cannonier wins, we haven't seen this one yet. I thought we did. I had to Google it. Turns out we've never seen Paulo Costa versus Jared Cannonier. I think this would be a fight that sort of should have happened a while ago. 2 very heavy hitters. go up against each other, two veterans within the division, and I think that could be very fun. Alternatively, if Khamzat loses to Dricus du Plessis at 319, I wouldn't hate a matchup against Khamzat. Costa was sort of selling that fight in this post-fight speech, sort of cut some promo for it. Does rely on 319. We don't even know if Chimaev will win. And even if he doesn't win, it could be a pretty unimpressive performance, or it could be a very close fight and Chimaev could fight sort of the top 5. I don't know, it really depends on what happens at 319, but my favorite pick would be Michael Venom Page. So I say Paulo Costa versus the winner of Michael Venom Page versus Jared Cannonier. And now on to the winner of the main event, because Poirier retired. Max Holloway, very, very good win. It was a very dominant showing from him. Admittedly, it was kind of sad to see him have such a dominant performance over someone like Poirier in his retirement fight, but it had to be done. He brutalized Poirier on the feet for most of the fight. Did take some big damage as well, so he will need sort of a big layoff after this one. But yeah, he proved that at lightweight, he has a name for himself. He looked really powerful as well. So while he was calling for Ilya, and he does say that he's open to the Ilya rematch, I think it's a bit early, especially with the current state of the top of lightweight. We have about 3 or 4 contenders that think they deserve a title shot next. So in the meantime, Charles Oliveira lost to Ilya Topuria, got finished badly, to put it bluntly. He got knocked out in the first round cold, and he definitely does need to fight down. Holloway just below him, probably will be like right below him, or maybe one spot above him, but they're going to be very similar rankings wise. And I think this would be a worthy fight for a BMF belt. The BMF belt in itself I don't really like. It's sort of pick and choosy where it's used and when it counts. But against someone like Oliveira, this could be a very worthy BMF. Oliveira most finishes within the UFC. He mixes up submissions, finishes with knockouts, TKOs. Holloway, legend of the sport, and a lot of people forget they've already fought. Granted, it wasn't much of a fight all the way back in the early parts of both of their careers. They went up against each other, and very early, Oliveira suffered an esophageal injury. Ducked down against a cage, put his hands up. It wasn't related to the fight. It looked like it was because Holloway was landing pretty big on him early on. But it was unrelated. Sort of a fluke win for Holloway, and it would be nice to see him get that one back and sort of solidify his win over Oliveira. And they've both changed so much since, so I think that would be a really fun matchup to make. Oliveira is realistically deserving of the BMF title if he does win, because he has the most finishes. And in the meantime, run up another fight with Ilya against Justin Gaethje, Arman, even maybe a Paddy, but I don't really like that one as much. And then maybe the winner of this could go back up against Ilya Topuria. If it's Max, that'd be a good rematch. If it's Charles, maybe another one after that. But either way, I think this would be a good fight to set both of these guys up for title contention again. And yeah, so that was it, guys. Those are all my future matchups for the fighters on the main card of UFC 318. Right now on the screen, a compilation of all of my future matchups. Dustin Poirier excluded, obviously, because he retired. Yeah, what do you guys think? Do you guys like these ones? Do you guys not? This one was actually kind of difficult to make because so many of these fighters were outside of the 15 or just now encroaching on the top 15 of their respective divisions after their wins and losses. So there were a bunch of options of these sort of up-and-coming names within the division. Yeah, honestly, could be multiple different possibilities for each one of these fighters in their next fights, but I like the ones I've picked. See you guys next week for Whittaker versus Derrida. That's going to be a fun one. And yeah, bye-bye.